when the Cezanne watch group reached out to me, I have to admit I'd never heard of them. I'd never heard of this particular brand. I know there's lots of different brands coming out of China, but I'm really glad that they did reach out to me because, well, there's something a little bit special about these watches. This brand, I think, has a bright future ahead of them. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches, and I do not claim to be a watch expert or even know what brands are actually out there or emerging, especially coming out of China, especially watches that are coming out on AliExpress or somewhere in between, because there are so many different brands coming out. So which is why I'd never heard of this one. But I'm glad that they did actually reach out to me because having this watch in hand has surprised me. I don't think it's a perfect watch, but I think there are some elements to this watch which are far superior to what the price actually represents. And for me, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking this is a watch brand that I need to keep an eye on, because if they're this good now, what are they going to be like in a couple of years? Now, they did send this watch out to me, which is why you would have seen that sponsored icon pop up, and of course, why I'm going to leave some links below. And I want to now just share with you, and especially point out the things to you that have really stood out to me that I think may make it worthwhile that me and you guys keep an eye on this brand. Let's have a look. So there were a number of surprises for me when this watch arrived, and firstly was the price for it, because they list them at $249, and for that you're getting quite a few things, including a Epson YN55 powered watch. You're getting it in this absolutely incredible sort of packaging that it sort of comes with, but it also has 100 meters of water resistance, comes with a tool, comes with a spare strap, which is actually particularly nice, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. And it has this nice internal travel pouch, which presents the watch nicely, but it's also something that is very usable. But once I actually took this one out of the packaging, the first thing, and it stood out to me more than anything else, is the bracelet. This is a beads of rice, polished, brushed on the sides, all individual links. All those beads are individual, but it's also just the feel of this one. Lovely and soft, no sharp edges, and this style of bracelet always does feel beautiful on wrist. Unfortunately, the clasp wasn't quite as good as I'd hoped. It's perfectly fine with 3 micro adjust, fold over safety clasp and milled, but it feels a little bit more like one of those sort of standard off the shelf clasps. But the bracelet, wow, that is beautiful. Also the texture and color of that dial, especially when you get it out in the sun, you'll see it has a sort of a vertical brushing to that silver, and it really shines, and it's nice just having that slight but subtle sort of pattern to it. Really gives a silver dial something a little bit extra. And what I don't think I noticed when I first looked at the pictures of this one is the more vintage style crown, or at least I call them vintage when they're a little bit thinner like that. I think it sort of suits this sort of style watch, but also just is nice and easy to access. As I mentioned, this is the Epson movement, which also does have hacking and hand winding, which is a nice sort of standard movement, especially this sort of price range. But when I look closer at the dial, there's a couple of choices which I'm still a little bit unsure about, but then there's other choices that really impress me. Firstly, having the black date wheel, I think looks quite good, and it really balances because all the dark printing that's on the dial, because all those things are printed that you can see there. But it does make it a little bit harder to read the date window. I think that is a bit of a compromise. Aesthetically, I think it looks great, but just means you have to look a little bit closer if you want to tell the date. The hands are skeletonized and dark, so they really match in with all that printing on the dial, but I'm not 100% convinced that they are the right handset, or maybe they are. I'm a little bit confused. What do you guys think? Do you think this is a correct handset for this, or perhaps should they have thought about something else? Now, I'm not complaining about the lume because it's actually quite good, especially when it's fully charged up, but the biggest surprise for me is the numbers on the date are loomed. That's really cool. What I can tell you though is when it then switches over at midnight, because the number that was showing up after midnight hasn't had any light, it then goes dark. Sorry to interrupt guys, but I was just hoping that you might just be willing to click on that subscribe button if you've not already done so. It just makes such a huge difference to me, my life, my watch collecting journey, and this channel. So yes, hey, do you mind? Just click on that little subscribe button. Thanks guys. Let's get back to this watch. It does have a great set of dimensions, having a case of 38, a thickness of 12.6, a lug to lug of 45.6, and because it has those female end links, it does drop away nicely. 20mm lug width, and there is a little bit of taper just down under 18mm. And that dial that we've been talking about is covered by a piece of sapphire crystal. It's double domed as well, and what I do like about it is how it then transitions into that polished solid bezel. And you'll see that it is a concave bezel. I've had this on a few watches and it is a feature that I always have to point out because I like it. Because it's polished, because it's concave, it plays with the light a little bit. And I just really like it. I think if I was ever to create a watch, that is a feature that I would put on the watch. I also like how it then lines up with the case very nicely. And you'll see that there is that sort of brushed and then polish, and they meet really well. So instead of sort of falling down to the case, it falls down to an edge or a lip and then transitions across. And it does that really well. The brushing is actually really nice, no complaints whatsoever. That sign crown, as I've already shown you, and just look how that beads of rice bracelet integrates into the case too. Really nice, really fits in nicely. They are solid end links, no movement whatsoever. Not really much to show you on the case back, just the sort of name and some specifications written around the edge. So that beads of rice bracelet makes it fit down onto my wrist really nicely. The dimensions fit perfectly on my 17cm wrist, and I'm certainly not complaining about the on-wrist experience. In fact, I'm not complaining about many things about this one. The only things I will sort of point out is it's not my favorite clasp on this one, especially since it has such a great bracelet. It sort of integrates into that one, and I just think that's a little bit of a letdown. I'm not 100% convinced about the hands or the name of this particular brand, but what I can say is everything else is really good. And as I said at the start of this video, I think this is a brand that I think we need to keep our eyes on, because I've seen a few brands come out that start fairly strong but then get really good, and I think this could be one of those brands. So I'm definitely going to be keeping my eyes on Suzanne, and maybe they might update that logo. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Maybe you'd like to check out these two videos next.